All right, I see that the recording is on. So let's start first with the studies objectives. So by studies objectives, I want to rather focus on the features that are common to both studies. Since, let's say, the more technical aspects are all detailed in the document itself, and you can have a look at them directly. So the first common feature that we have for both studies is the scope. We are looking in all cases for an analysis, for use cases, for recommendations that are relevant for an EU-wide scope, with a focus mainly on urban mobility. We are looking, therefore, mainly for use cases, also for recommendations that actually are relevant for practitioners. So that's our main audience. It's mainly people working on this topic on the day-to-day. So it's less academia, let's say. It's more really practitioner, and that's quite important when thinking about the studies objectives. We are looking also for an approach that is very dynamic. So we are not just asking here for an overview or a state-of-the-art description of what's happening on hydrogen, what's happening on mobility data spaces, but we are looking for a more dynamic approach with a problematic, with looking at what are current bottlenecks, where are opportunities, what are the challenges, and what can be the benefits. So the kind of dynamics that we would like to see in the study. An important point that if you had a look at the request for proposal already, you will surely have noticed are feedback loops. So as the IT Urban Mobility, we are a large partnership of leading organizations in Europe, be it cities, research centers, universities, industry, companies, startups. And they are, of course, doing a lot on all sorts of urban mobility topics, including hydrogen data spaces. And so we would like to actually sync the studies of this year with relevant insights from the community. So these feedback loops, I put here as an example the SIG, stands for Special Interest Group, which is actually a group within the IT Urban Mobility of organizations interested and active on hydrogen, and we also have one on mobility data spaces. So these feedback loops, I mean, taking these into account is critical from our perspective. What is important for you to know is that the organizations and the coordination with the EIT Urban Mobility initiatives and with the partnership is not part of your responsibility, it's part of our responsibility to coordinate that. But it's part of the responsibility of the awarded entity then to take that into account and to factor that in while preparing the study. We are expecting in the study that the awarded entity would use a tool or a methodology to actually answer the main research questions, but also that can, once the study is published, build the basis for potential future consulting services. So that's also a very important aspect and a common feature for both studies. Regarding the timeline, we are looking for a project start mid-April and for completion by the end of September. By completion, we mean the research part. So basically the research and the study completion. The layout will then be on us afterwards. So we have a specific layout for studies that we publish, and basically putting the raw study into this layout is on us and is an activity that we will carry out after completion. And regarding the budget available per study, the maximum budget available per study is 68.1 thousand euro, as you can see here. Now, moving on to the next part of the RfP, part 2.3, about the fee requirement for dissemination services. So dissemination is actually a key part of our activities at the EIT Urban Mobility, and especially a key part of sharing the main findings of studies that we reproduce. So this fee requirement is actually a fee that we require for dissemination services. So a fee that needs to be paid by the awarded entity to EIT Urban Mobility for provision of specific services, which you can see here, including the report layout to then visibility opportunity actually for the partner writing the study in terms of marketplace feature, in terms of newsletter feature, in terms of being invited at the Tomorrow Mobility World Congress to present the study or to relevant webinars. Very importantly here is that in section 4.1, the exclusion criteria include failing to submit an order for dissemination services. So this is really a critical aspect of the proposal. And here, by order for dissemination services, we mean actually an engagement by the candidate that, if awarded, the candidate will then contract EIT Urban Mobility for these dissemination services. Moving on with the exploitation part. So I mentioned in the objectives that actually the provision of advisory services once the study has been delivered is a critical aspect for us. So I can share with you a bit more detail, and you will find this in section 2.4 of the request for proposal. So basically, the expected exploitation activities, they consist in the provision of advisory services to third parties. So it can be to public authorities, it can be to cities, but also to businesses, to basically have a tailored use, a tailored application of the tool or of the methodology that will be used in the study. So the study and the use cases in the study, we expect to have them actually addressed via a specific methodology or specific tool that will produce specific results. And this tool or methodology, we actually want to, as a promotion activity when the study is published, to offer the possibility to interested third party to have it applied to their specific use case. And so this is where the provision of advisory services as part of the exploitation comes in, which means that we would be looking, when the study has been completed, for joint business development activities between the awarded entity and EIT Urban Mobility, where obviously this can and should be negotiated, especially the part on the intellectual property rights, which we understand is quite complex and also key in the exploitation. And so we are actually willing and open to discuss this with the awarded entity. And yeah, just as a note, in the RfP, the exploitation is not listed as deliverable in section 2.7. However, it is actually highly valued, the explanation of the exploitation services. So it is expected also to be a part of the proposal. I will have a point about that later also in the presentation. So in the award criteria, you will see that the strength of the exploitation planning is actually highly valued. If we now move on towards more the proposal schedule, you may have seen that in the RfP. So the RfP has been published on 14th of February. We have a deadline on the 28th of March. And with the notification, evaluation, standstill contract signature, we are looking at a start date after Easter. We have here on the 11th of April. That's just to give you a kind of idea of the next steps moving from now. And then, as I said, the completion of the studies is foreseen for end of September. So from this point on, I have 2 more slides that I want to share with you before moving to the Q&A. This one on the award criteria, so a very important part to take into account in the RfP, part 4.2. As you can see here, so I summarize the main 6 award criteria. So as you can see, fit with the study's objectives, obviously very important. The methodology or tool that will be applied and whether it is capable to produce quantitative outputs. Then the feedback loop and data collections. So as said, this is very important to us, hence also the weights that we're giving to this criteria with 25 points. Then comes how comprehensive and accurate the methodology or tool or indicators used in the study is. So this obviously will be evaluated. In terms of comprehensiveness, we also mean the coverage, so the geographical coverage beyond just answering the research questions, whether the methodology or tool used can actually be applied across the EU. So always remembering the importance of this scope from our side. And then the 2 last one, the track record of the team in producing and having delivered similar content. And the last criteria, as I mentioned, the exploitation part being very important to us. So the activities that will be developed once the study is completed, also an important criteria with 25 points. In terms of weighting, generally, we have a weighting of 85% on the technical content, so which is basically summed up in the award criteria I just mentioned, and a weighting of 15% for the financial offer. Moving on with a few further information, which I think can be of interest, cross-cutting across the RfP sections. So first, for entities wishing to tender for both studies, we expect 1 proposal per study. So the proposals can be evaluated separately. Then what I meant in section 2.3 and 2.4 with the contracts for dissemination services and the exploitation agreement, these should be agreed separately. But having said that, the order for dissemination services and the exploitation plan must be submitted as part of the proposals. So we are expecting applicants to, as I mentioned, produce or add an order for dissemination services, so stating that actually in case they are awarded this piece of work, they are going to contract EIT Mobility to do the dissemination of these services. And likewise, an exploitation plan must be submitted for provision of advisory services once the study has been completed. And then last information I want to share here, there are no requirements on minimum numbers of partners per studies or minimum number of types of partners per studies. So the participation is open to all interested applicants. And that's basically what is important here is if more than one organization applies as part of the same proposal, is that actually the roles of the different organizations are really contributing to meeting the objectives and contributing to the quality of the reports. That's really what is mostly important for us. And lastly, here you will find some interesting links, relevant documentation that you might want to have a closer look at. On the right side, so I put the QR code that's the landing page on our website for the request for proposal. And on this page, you will basically have access to both links. On the left side, which I put here, the link to the request for proposal itself. And then we also have created a Q&A document, which is actually summing up in writing most of what I've been presenting today, so that you can always revert back to these documents and have some information. For any specific questions regarding this RFP, we have a functional email address, which is procurement@eitmobility.eu. And this is the address you should use, mentioning the name of the RFP. This is the address you should use in case you have any written questions to submit.